Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa with me, Ellen Gainsford. Tonight, COVID-19 spreads across Africa. 44 of the continent's 54 countries now have confirmed cases of the virus. As governments and health authorities strive to limit widespread infection, we'll bring you the latest from our correspondents. And also on the show, Boko Haram extremists kill more than 90 soldiers in Chad. It's the deadliest attack by the extremist group on the country's armed forces. There are now more than 2,400 confirmed cases of the coronavirus across Africa, and there have been over 60 reported deaths. Many governments on the continent have enacted strict measures to slow the spread of the pandemic, closing borders and asking their citizens to stay home. But for people living in close quarters, social distancing or self-isolation aren't always possible. The Ivory Coast is one of a multitude of countries currently under a lockdown because of the crisis. Our correspondents, Thais Brooke and Sam Bradpiece, bring us this report on how people are coping with the new measures.
These children haven't gone to school for more than 10 days now. Despite the threat of infection, they are otherwise carrying on as normal, playing football in the street and doing chores at home. Some of them, at least, are aware of the guidelines.
Ils m'ont donné des conseils, qu'il est bien laver mes mains, de pas m'approcher avec mes amis, mais on doit se séparer pendant 1 mètre.
In much of the Ivory Coast, such social distancing is almost impossible. Ignace works at the port of Abidjan, travelling to and from work every day in a crowded taxi. When he gets home, it is impossible for him to avoid contact with his neighbours.
Voici au fait une cour commune. Voici notre cour. Il y a 13 portes et environ une cinquantaine de personnes qui habitent là, y compris les enfants. Alors, on ne peut pas vivre séparés puisque c'est une cour commune. Le matin, le voisin est là, le voisinage est autre, les enfants jouent ensemble, tout ça. En tout cas, dans ces quartiers précaires, ce n'est pas possible.
The cramped conditions are making some anxious.
Ils sont mélangés, on ne sait pas qui est atteint, qui n'est pas atteint, on ne sait pas comment vivre avec les personnes qui sont atteintes, vraiment on ne sait pas.
Poverty is a reality for much of the population, but it is not the only factor that could hinder any attempts at confinement.
Cette façon d'exprimer la sociabilité en Afrique, on ne vit jamais seul. On ne vit jamais seul. Vivre seul, c'est considéré un peu comme une pauvreté humaine. Mais imaginez un parent malade tout de suite. La réaction sera de courir à son chevet.
Around 90% of all employment in the Ivory Coast is informal, which means any disruption, any pending lockdown would be disastrous to the economic lives of people living here. Self-isolation is a luxury that few can afford.
To the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where President Felix Tshisekedi has declared a state of emergency and announced radical new measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. The nation's borders are closed and the capital, Kinshasa, is now cut off from the rest of the country. There are at least 48 confirmed cases of the virus. Our correspondent, Clément Bonnereau, has the latest.
So far, cases of COVID-19 have been limited to the capital, Kinshasa. But the Congolese government is taking no chances. In a televised speech on Tuesday evening, the president, Felix Tshisekedi, said that the country was now at war with what he described as an invisible enemy. He's declared a state of emergency and suspended all internal passenger flights to and from Kinshasa. The aim of these measures, of course, is to stop the spread of the novel coronavirus across the country and also to isolate the capital. That's because Congolese authorities know all too well that should the epidemic worsen here in the DRC, the healthcare system would be simply unable to cope with an influx of sick people. That's something that was confirmed by the National Doctors Union, who said that there are only 50 respirators in the country. These new measures come a week after other safety and precautionary measures were implemented, including the suspension of all international flights. Schools, churches, as well as bars and restaurants have also been closed, and gatherings are now limited to no more than 20 people.
Right now we are exposed and no one seems to care. Those are the words of the president of Zimbabwe's Doctors Association. Thousands of medical workers have gone on strike in the country, complaining of a lack of protective equipment and water shortages, as they gear up to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. There have been at least 3 recorded cases in Zimbabwe in less than a week, and 1 death. The outbreak is likely to test the nation's already stretched health system. Now to Nigeria, where the vice president and several other senior politicians are self-isolating after coming into contact with 2 people infected with the coronavirus. President Muhammadu Buhari's chief of staff is also said to have COVID-19, one of a growing number of cases in Africa's most populous nation. This Wednesday, Nigeria received test kits and protective gear from Chinese billionaire Jack Ma, the founder of e-commerce giant Alibaba. China's richest man has pledged to donate equipment to all 54 countries in Africa. As South Africa gears up for a 21-day lockdown, there's been widespread panic buying. People have been rushing to stock up on essentials ahead of the shut-in. All shops and businesses will close, except those providing essential services. There are currently over 700 confirmed cases in the country, which is the worst affected nation in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a worry for health officials, as South Africa has a large population of HIV and tuberculosis sufferers, who may be at greater risk to the virus due to weakened immune systems. Now we head to Cameroon, where the country is in mourning following the death of legendary saxophonist Manu Dibango. The Afro-jazz musician was one of the first global stars to succumb to the coronavirus. Our correspondent, Marcella Amako, brings us this report.
A rendition of one of Manu Dibango's hits by a young artist with the Afro soul group Makaz. Manu had practically adopted the group. When the leader found out about his death, he regrouped the band to pay homage to the fallen music icon.
La nuit s'étend sur le village.
The reunion is full of sadness as the artists pay tribute to the Afro-jazz icon. The saxophonist spent many hours here with them over the years.
Quand Manu arrivait ici, il avait toujours besoin d'avoir un regard panoramique sur ce qui se faisait. Alors il s'asseyait là. Et d'ici, il observait tout le groupe et il dirigeait tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, on se rend compte que le Covid ne connaît pas les vedettes. Le Covid-19 ne connaît pas les icônes.
The music legend lost his life to coronavirus in the early hours of Tuesday in Paris. On the streets of Yaoundé, the passing of the 86-year-old Cameroonian saxophonist has left many in shock.
J'étais vraiment frappée par cette nouvelle parce que bon, c'est un ancien que j'ai connu. Je peux dire qu'il a bercé ma jeunesse. Oui, j'aimais beaucoup ces chansons Somaloba parce que bon, cette chanson qui veut dire que remercie Dieu si tu as ton pain quotidien, quoi. C'est pour ça qu'il disait Somaloba.
The Cameroonian star touched the lives of many across the continent. Barely hours after his death was announced, this vendor says he's almost sold out all of Manu Dibango's CDs.
Depuis ce matin, j'ai vendu près de 5 CD de Manu Dibango, et ce qui est un peu rare de nos jours. Donc, je pense de tout ce que j'ai maintenant, il ne me reste qu'une seule pièce.
Music icon Manu Dibango leaves behind a successful career and a lasting legacy.
And finally, in other news, nearly 100 Chadian soldiers have been killed by Boko Haram in the deadliest attack ever by the group on the country's armed forces. The Islamist militants have increased their attacks in the region in recent months. Nicolas Jamin has a story.
On Wednesday, more Chadian troops arrived in the Lake Chad region. The country's army is considered to be one of the most efficient ones on the continent, but it has just suffered one of its worst setbacks. Nearly 100 Chadian soldiers were killed on Monday in this region by jihadist group Boko Haram. President Idriss Déby, who's been in power for 30 years, visited the scene of the attack.
perdre autant d'hommes dans l'histoire, c'est pour la première fois. Et je suis pour ça écœuré. Je voudrais dire aussi aux Tchadiens, jusqu'au dernier mort, y compris les blessés, ils n'ont pas cédé le terrain. Ils ont gardé le terrain. Ils se sont accrochés sur ce terrain.
The attack took place early on Monday morning. It lasted more than 7 hours. According to security sources, the jihadists managed to run away with military equipment. In recent months, Boko Haram have increased their attacks in the Lake Chad region, which lies on the borders of 4 countries: Chad, Nigeria, Niger and Cameroon. Since 2015, regional powers have been fighting together against jihadists within the multinational Joint Task Force, and they also use the help of local vigilantes.
Thank you for watching this edition of Eye on Africa. Stay with us on France 24 for more international news.